I'm Rose. I'm a winter naturalist at Aspen Center for Environmental Studies, or ACES. If this is your first time ever at ACES, welcome. If you've been here a million times, welcome back. Each winter, ACES partners with Wilderness Workshop and the Roaring Fork Audubon to co-host these Naturalist Nights, this free winter speaker series featuring experts from across the country who explore different topics of the natural world with our community. Talks will be hosted every other week. They're on Wednesdays at the Roaring Fork High School in Carbondale and on Thursdays here at Hallam Lake. Grassroots TV, with Jeremy back there, is live streaming tonight's presentation on their website, also on Wilderness Workshop and on ACE's Facebook page and YouTube channel. So there's lots of places to find this. A cleaned up recording will also be made available on ACE's and Wilderness Workshop's YouTube channel in the coming days. We would also like to thank our generous sponsors that help make Naturalist Nights a success. Thank you to our gold level sponsors, Reese Henry, Ken Ransford, and Two Leaves and a Bud. And our silver level sponsors, Aspen Square, Ute Mountaineer, Blazing Adventures, Aspen Ski Company, Bonfire Coffee, and Bristlecone Mountain Sports. These businesses provide financial and in-kind donations that make Naturalist Nights possible, including the cookies and tea that you're eating and drinking right now. We hope you'll also join us here next Wednesday for our Potbelly Perspectives talk, which is called Surviving Shivling with Chris Warner, and then in 2 weeks for our next Naturalist Night, also here, Born to be Wild, the Ecological Benefits of Wild and Scenic Rivers with Jennifer Black. And now I'm super excited to introduce tonight's speaker, Taylor Rabe. I myself am a naturalist who's generally inquisitive, and also I lead these daily educational snowshoe tours, which you can totally ask me about after the talk. And I've been super curious about all things wolves, especially this year in Colorado. Social behaviors, what they eat and how, and all things wolves. So you can imagine I had a million questions to ask Taylor when she walked in the door of the center yesterday. And even though she was probably super tired after 12 hours of travel here from Yellowstone, she answered questions. And in just a few minutes, I learned so many new facts and ways of thinking about wolf behavior and reintroduction and how humans fit into nature's puzzle alongside wolves. Taylor was born and raised in Northeast Ohio, and she graduated in 2018 from The Ohio State University with a zoology degree and spent time doing conservation work in South Africa before moving out west to Yellowstone National Park. Taylor worked as a naturalist in the park and then was selected as Conservation Nation's first inaugural fellow, which landed her her first full-time field position with the Yellowstone Wolf Project. She has been observing and studying gray wolves for the last 5 years, and tonight Taylor is here to share some stories about her experiences with Yellowstone's wolves. And I'm so excited. So, please remember to hold your questions until the end of the presentation. We'll have time for a few questions. And yeah, thank you so much for your attention, and please welcome Taylor Rabe.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I appreciate all of you coming out to hear me speak a little bit about the work that I do in Yellowstone and the research that we've been gathering over the last 28 years on Yellowstone wolves. Beforehand, I just want to let you guys know that there are going to be a few graphic slides in my presentation. I will try to do my best to remember to give a little heads up if you want to close your eyes or look away before those come up. But thanks again, and I hope you enjoy. All of the videos and photos, except for a couple, are mine that I've taken over the last 5 years in Yellowstone. This is just to kind of highlight that wolves are not always trying to eat elk when they're in the same area. So again, my name is Taylor Rabe. I'm a biological science technician for the Yellowstone Wolf Project, and I've been working full-time for about 2 years now. But prior to being hired on full-time, I volunteered for about 3.5 years for free. So now I just get paid. So Yellowstone, the park is at the core of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which is a 20 million acre expanse of wildlands made up of public and private lands spread over Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. This ecosystem is a renowned map of wildlife, greatest areas of geothermal activity on the planet. It also happens to be the most reliable place in the entire world to see wild wolves. This is something I always like to start my presentation off with, something we all know and love and are very familiar with. So people are attracted to the big, sexy megafauna, grizzly bears, mountain lions, wolves. But wolves have become a huge reason that people visit Yellowstone National Park. They've become loved by people from all over the world, but not without pushback. I like to show a comparison between wolves and dogs. Dogs are something we all enjoy spending time with. A lot of us own them, and dogs are just big domesticated wolves. Just like dogs, wolves like to roll around in smelly things. This is a nice grizzly bear poop on one of our year-old wolves having some fun in it. And because people see their dogs in wolves, it makes them so likable and it helps people relate to them. They're extremely social and charismatic animals. Just like our dogs, wolves need a good scratching every now and then. And wolves also enjoy toys. Wolves are cooperative breeders, and these wolves are bringing presents to and from the new puppies, even if they aren't their own. So just like our pet dogs, wolves love bones and antlers and tree branches, bark, all kinds of things. These are toys in the wild. And so these wolves that are bringing toys back to their puppies are not the mother wolves. These are mostly big sisters from the Molly's pack. Wolves love a good game of tug of war. So these are some puppies from the Lupin Creek pack. They were about 7 months old at the time. They had killed a bighorn sheep, and they played with this piece of skin for about 3 months every time they walked by the area. And they even play leapfrog. So these behaviors are something that we have the opportunity to observe and share with people from all over the world. This is one of the reasons that people have fallen in love with wolves, myself included. But this hasn't always been the case, and wolves still cause extreme controversy. And although wolves are liked a lot better now, some people still hate them. They always have, and they probably always will. So in the early 1900s, wolves were eradicated from the western part of the United States. The last Yellowstone wolf was shot and killed in 1926. This was a common occurrence, and the political pool that wolves have on the West is still very prominent, as I'm sure you all know. Wolves were vilified in the media then, and they're still vilified in the media now. Little Red Riding Hood, the Three Little Pigs, Beauty and the Beast, they're trying to eat her dad, right? And Frozen, they're trying to eat them. And so the media continues to paint wolves in a very negative light. In 1995 and 1996, Doug Smith, the former lead wolf biologist for that Yellowstone Wolf Project, helped reintroduce the first set of wolves into Yellowstone National Park. From 1995 to 1996, we brought down 31 wolves from Canada, and we put them into acclimation pens, which were 1 acre in size, for about 10 weeks. The following year, we brought another 10 wolves down from northwest Montana and put them back into the park as well. People were very angry, and they fought the reintroduction every step of the way. Now, I belong on the team that continues to educate, research, and provide information to the world on wild wolves. The Yellowstone Wolf Project is arguably the most successful carnivore reintroduction program in the entire world. So this is an infographic created by one of our research associates, Kira Cassidy, and it just highlights some of the work that we've been doing over the last 28 years. Visited over 6,000 carcasses, have done over 1,700 aerial flights, have collared over 450 individual wolves, have hiked over 20,000 miles, and have over 113 scientific publications. And here's a cute video for good measure. So this just highlights the historic gray wolf range. You can see that in the dark green sage color going all the way over towards the eastern part of the US. The current habitat in orange, and this is even a little outdated because we have wolves in Colorado now, and then the potential habitat in that rusty color. So you can see that the wolves are starting to recolonize the western part of the US, and they've expanded, and they're in places that no one ever thought they would be. When we reintroduced wolves back into Yellowstone in 1995, if you would have asked anyone, would we expect to see wolves in California, they would have laughed, right? And now they're doing well there. No one thought wolves would be as visible as they are in Yellowstone National Park, so it's become very, very useful and easy for us to study these wolves over the last 28 years. Their population stays right around 100 wolves at any given time. You can see that population stabilized right around 2009, and that's what the capacity sits at. Wolves do regulate themselves and their numbers, so if the population starts to increase, something dramatic happens that decreases the number again, whether that's a distemper outbreak. This video down below, this is of the Junction Butte Pack. They're the most reliable and visible pack in Yellowstone, and at the time they had 35 members. That's insane. You would never see a pack that large outside of a protected area, and that's just because of the hostility surrounding wolves. They're hunted, a pack couldn't persist of that size. There was a time one kill 3 bison simultaneously, and they ate them in one day. So right now we have about 120 wolves in the park, give or take, and that's between about 10 different packs, 5 of them being up on the northern range, which I'll talk about a little bit more, but that's where I spend a majority of my time. This is a current up-to-date Yellowstone pack map, an aerial map, so these are locations we get from our plane, and our wolves typically have home ranges from about 150 to 300 square miles. Some are bigger, some are smaller. This pack map was created by my coworker Jeremy Sundaraj, and I just want to point out that aerial locations are not obtained during wolf hunting season, which goes from September to March, and so some of the wolf pack territories do not represent all of the transboundary space use. Generally, less than 5% of natural space use outside of the park is used outside of the park by our wolves. So this is a polygon of the northern range. The black road there is the road that most people who are trying to see wolves and wildlife are driving on from Gardner, Montana, all the way over to the northeast in Cook City, Montana. And this is a sightability map. So wherever you see the orangey yellow color, that is the likelihood that you'll see wolves in that area at any given time. And so there are really obvious hot spots throughout the park on the northern range that you have a really good chance of seeing wolves. Someone pretty much sees wolves in Yellowstone every single day, whether that's one individual or a pack of 20. It just really varies. This is a heat. These are obtained by our GPS collars. These are obtained by our pilot taking exact location points. And so this can just give you an idea of where exactly are the wolves spending a majority of their time. So now we'll talk about a little bit of what I do as a member of the Yellowstone Wolf Project. I'm in charge of monitoring, management, education, and research. Monitoring includes driving throughout the park and listening to different radio-collared wolves. I have a receiver in the car that when a radio-collared wolf is in the area, it'll begin to beep, and that'll let me know to get out, try and get a direction on them, and begin to look for them. Again, most of my work is done on the north, just because easily accessible and visible there, but I do go all the way down into the interior near Old Faithful and Grand Prismatic to track packs that are down there as well. Sometimes I get to do the fun stuff. So this is an aerial flight. Quick question, do we have sound? And then something that's fun is down in the bottom right. This is the alpha male of the Cougar Creek pack. This was mid-July. There was no snow except for one small patch, and he found it. So the air gives us better visual locations, especially of packs that we rarely get to see from the ground. Packs that spend most of their time in the interior of the park or just hard to reach places. Then there's management, which is a very important part of my job, a little controversial in some ways. We know wolves need to cross the road. They spend time near the road corridor. There's a huge piece of pavement that runs through the middle of their territories, especially in the north, where a majority of our wolves are located. However, there are proper ways for the wolves to behave around the road, and one of our jobs is making sure that the wolves are behaving properly and that people are behaving properly. We get about 5 million visitors to the park every year, so we're dealing with a lot of human-wolf interactions. Wolves are bound to have some type of interactions with people, but our goal is to minimize those impacts that they have on the specific wolf after they're occurring. So the wolf is as close as it looks to these people. They could have reached out and touched it. At the time, this wolf was about 8 to 9 months old, so it's still young, still very curious. That same day, he stole a photographer's tripod, like a giant stick. You can see in the bottom, he's play bowing. This isn't something that wolves do for fun. This is a predatory behavior. It looks, from the outside, it looks really cute and funny, but this was just the beginning of a long few months for us where we spent hundreds of hours hazing this individual, both bear management, law enforcement, Wolf Project. This wolf was very, very poorly behaved. A few weeks later, this wolf we called Tripod followed one of our raven biologists into the backcountry at very, very close distance. Our biologist was clapping hands, throwing rocks at the wolf. It didn't leave until it got a can of bear spray in the face. We then made the decision we're going to lethally remove this wolf from the park. Regardless of how people feel, human lives will always come before wildlife, and we didn't want this animal to potentially bite someone or hurt someone when we weren't around. This was the last time we hazed this November 11th, 2020. So hazing, we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. The wolves are a lot faster than we are, so often we're running around like madmen trying to get close enough to implement some type of aversive conditioning. By some miracle, we happened to catch this wolf during capture, and he got fitted with a radio collar and became Wolf 1273M. And he became one of the founding members of a new pack in the park, the Rescue Creek Pack. They're a very powerful pack. He's a very prominent wolf in that pack. And this is the last time we had a close encounter with 1273. He became one of the most elusive wolves in the park. A ton of news articles went around about this wolf and the successes of hazing. We have other countries reaching out to us about our hazing because we don't want to immediately go to lethal removal. If there's a way that behavior, we'll try and we'll do our best. And hazing is very, very successful, and we're going to talk about that now. So this is how we want wolves to cross the road. This was a pup, about 7 months old, very uncomfortable around people. This day, there were about 50 people next to me, just out of frame here, and we were able to get 26 wolves across the road that day. That's the one and only time it's ever been done. Remember this wolf. We don't have sound, it seems. But she walked right up into a vehicle's door that's open, threw her head back, and is howling. She's very, very important. She was, at the time, one of the most habituated wolves in the park. Everyone had portrait shots of her. She would let people take pictures of her. She would walk down the middle of the road with a line of cars going behind her for 10 miles. Some of these wolves are behaving okay, but you'll see some of them aren't. Like this gray wolf, she still gives us problems. But most of the adults, they don't want anything to do with the road corridor, and they're going pretty quick. And then this wolf here, this is my favorite wolf in the park, 1229. She's walking down the middle of the road in Gardner, Montana, outside of the park during hunting season. So she was very habituated. She was very comfortable around people. Unfortunately, about a year ago today, she was trapped and shot outside of the park legally. And so when we have habituated wolves in the park, they almost always die. They do all die in one way or another. So this is an example of hazing. Without sound, it's going to look probably like nothing. But we're laying on the horn here. We're scaring the wolf off the road. He had been walking down the road for a good time with us next to him. And so we're just reiterating that this is poor behavior. So this is low-level hazing. That can include things like throwing rocks, clapping or yelling, honking horns. And again, hazing has been very, very successful and effective when done at the right time and through repetition. It's really important for us to implement hazing during teachable moments. Hanging out on the road corridors, in picnic areas, maybe at campgrounds, just anywhere that they shouldn't be in close proximity to people. This is another example of low-level hazing. It's not going to seem like much to you. My husband's running and yelling and clapping at this wolf. This wolf wasn't necessarily interested in us, but he just walked right next to a group of 20 people. Shouldn't have been there, so we wanted to make sure that it had a negative consequence to the behavior it was doing. This wolf is what we would call tolerant. About 5 minutes later, I drove my car out into the middle of the road, and the wolf was standing there. I opened my door and shot him with some paintballs. This is from just a few days ago. This is a puppy from the Rescue Creek Pack, and these are some of our crews. And you can see the wolf's super interested. It's not really running away. There's a couple in the back that are a little bit more cautious, but this gray pup is definitely curious. This is where we kind of get into mid-level hazing, shooting paintballs, spraying bear spray. This is the wolf that was walking down the road in Gardner, 1229. My coworker Jeremy is shooting her with paintballs. You would have heard the paintball noises. Often we would like to hit them with the paintballs, but it's a lot easier said than done. They're fast. We're not good at shooting the paintballs when we're flailing everywhere. But often when we've advanced to the paintballs or bear spray or whatever it is, these are repeat offenders. They've already been honked at and yelled at. So we're trying to like amp up the level of hazing. So this is high-level hazing. This is when we're bringing in like a more aggressive approach, heavier artillery. This is done by bear management or law enforcement. And this is when we're using things such as firecracker shells or rubber bullets or bean bags. And all of this needs to be done by someone who really knows what they're doing, because if done incorrectly, it can really injure the animal or potentially kill them. So we don't do this. Law enforcement or other people who are trained in this does it. And again, repetition is so important. And so this is actually, but it's the same exact concept with wolves. Travis here from Bear Management, he's gonna shoot some rounds of bean bags, then he's gonna shoot firecracker shells. You're not going to hear it, so it's not gonna mean much to you. I don't know if we can get sound. Okay, here we go.
See me?
So shooting bean bags.
Huh? Hey. Hey. Hey, go. Hey. 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 Hey.
And so this is kind of the last step in hazing before we decide, do we have to lethally remove whichever animal is causing the problems? We've only ever had to lethally remove Park, one in 2009, one in 2011, and these wolves had most certainly been fed human food. They were panhandling, they would jump up on car doors trying to get snacks, they would rip into people's packs, try to eat whatever was in there, and so the habituation can lead to things like this. These are two wolf puppies that were hit simultaneously in the middle of the road. It's hard enough to hit one wolf, let alone two. So they were almost certainly playing in the middle of the road. A car came and hit them. It was a hit and run. We ended up catching the guy who hit him. But this is kind of the thing that we're trying to prevent when we're keeping the wolves away from humans. It's not because I'm worried about what they're going to do to you, but it's because we care about them. We want to keep them alive for as long as we can. 2 summers ago now, I got a Facebook message at 3 a.m. telling me that they saw a wolf get hit by a car. Remember that wolf that was howling in the middle of the road? This is her. I didn't need to ask for a description of the wolf because I already knew. The next day, my coworker Jeremy and I, we drove down to the middle of the park, and her collar was on mortality. When a radio collar shifts to mortality, it means they haven't moved for 12 or more hours. So we knew she was dead. So we went around and we did some hiking, and we're like, okay, we'll come pick her up on the way back. We got out of the car, we're tracking her, we could see where she was hitting the road. This is what we found. She was not dead. This is the most horrific thing I have ever seen. And when you spend as much time as myself and some of my colleagues do watching wolves, you can't help but become very fond of them. And so I know her story. I feel for her when I see her like this. And we didn't know what to do, so we called Doug Smith. We say, what do we do? He says, I have no idea. I don't know. So try to get her up. If a wolf has one broken leg, they've survived that. We've seen that many times. So she let us poke her with a stick. We're trying to get her up. She can't move. You can't help but feel for her. And so we did make the decision to euthanize her. You never know if that's the right decision until you made it. And so we did a necropsy on her. Her legs were shattered. She had a rib poking through. So we did make the right decision. But it doesn't make it an easy one. So if we can help continue to mitigate these human-wolf interactions, we will, because I've seen way too many dead wolves. And I don't care if it ruins a picture or a video anymore. And on to some more good stuff. The most important part of my job is education. As we know, wolves are extremely controversial. It's important for me to educate all types of people, whether or not they feel the same way about wolves as I do. and to let them know that wolves are beneficial to the landscape and important to the ecosystem. There is nothing better than hearing a kid who at the beginning of the week says, I don't really like wolves, whisper to his friend at the end of the week and say, wolves aren't that bad, right? So it's really, really cool to experience these types of moments. I have showed hundreds of people their first wild wolf. My coworker Jeremy and I interacted with over 14,000 visitors alone last summer. And there's no better feeling than getting to share a moment of someone seeing their first wild wolf. That is my favorite part of this job. And now this is probably the most important stuff that we do, the research. This is the meat and the potatoes of our project. We do something called winter study in early and late winter. Early winter is November, December. We just finished that up. And late winter is the entire month of March. And this is our critical wolf research period in the park. And so the reason we do this is to help detect kill rates. So what are the wolves feeding on? How often are they feeding? Are they selecting for a specific type of animal, an age of an animal, whatever it may be? There's an observation crew, which I'm part of. I've done 8 observation study periods. We follow a specific pack for 30 days straight from dawn until dusk. In March, that's about 15 to 16 hours a day, regardless of weather. Some days it's negative 20 degrees, and we're sitting outside. There's no warming up. There's no taking a break. You sit there all day long, even if the wolves are sleeping, even if you don't see your wolves. We record all behaviors, all observations that we see, hunting, sleeping, playing, feeding, whatever it may be. And we also interact with a lot of the general public this time of year. It's exhausting, as I'm sure you know. We get to go to carcasses, we fill out a ton of paperwork, and we just try to keep our wolves in view for as many hours as we can, even if that means hiking up onto a butte miles off the road. During our winter study in November, December, we do our first round of capture. So this is usually mid-December. And if we're lucky, the observation crew does get to go out and help with that. We get to help process our wolves. We'll be weighing the wolves, collecting samples such as nasal swabs, ocular swabs, fecal swabs. We'll measure their teeth and their body, and then they'll get fitted with a radio collar. And so we try to collar about 30% of our population. This is an example of weighing a wolf. It's a lot harder than it looks. So it's about 120 pounds of dead weight. Here's some more photos from our capture. We're taking pictures of dentition. We'll use those in future references. What if we capture the wolf again? How has the teeth changed? They'll get fitted with collars. And for me, it's really exciting to do capture because often I'm watching these wolves from 5 to 6 miles away and I can recognize them at that distance. So it's even cooler to get to see them up close, to really see their features and just get to spend time with an animal that I've come to love. So Doug Smith in the middle, he's getting ready to fit a collar. Our biologists have mastered the craft of fitting a wolf with a radio collar. You don't want it to be too tight, you don't want it to be too loose, so it is a skill to be able to get it on perfectly. And it only makes sense to discuss cluster crew after capture because we use our radio collars that we put out for clusters. So the cluster crew, they're in charge of hiking out to all of our different cluster sites. They're hardcore, hiking hundreds of miles in just a 30-day period, sometimes in 5 feet of snow, deep in the backcountry. There is no amount of money you could pay me to do this. None. This is an example of a GPS cluster. You can see all of these points from one of our collared wolves. A cluster is when 2 or more points are in a certain area. Points are taken every hour during our winter study. Why are wolves in an area for a long period of time? What are they doing? Exactly, eating or sleeping. So if you're on cluster crew, you're gonna either be hiking into a bed site or a kill site. If you're hiking into a kill site, we're gonna collect 3 samples. What are we collecting? If we wanna know the age of the animal, what are we gonna take? Yeah, we're gonna pull an I1, one of the incisors. Teeth have rings on them like a tree, and so that's gonna tell the animal. If we wanna know the condition of the animal, was it healthy or not, what are we taking? Nope. Bone marrow, exactly. So we're going to cut open the femur and take a sample of the bone marrow. And then we'll also take from elk the metatarsus, which is the back foot bone, and that's the last bone to develop in utero or in the womb. And so that'll tell us, is there any type of stunted growth? Is there a reason the wolf selected for this specific animal? So this is what a kill site might look like when you go to it. Up in the top right, that's going to be more of a scavenge. Everything's going to still kind of be there. It might be tucked underneath a log. But often when wolves do actually make a kill, it looks like a bomb went off. So a leg might be 2 miles over there. The skull's a mile over there. You might just find a rumen pile, the stomach contents like in the bottom left. So every kill site looks different. These are some examples of the mandible, the lower jawbone. You can see in the top left, that was from a really old individual, missing teeth. The teeth are super worn down. But compared to the elk down in the bottom right, that's a calf. So super healthy, super young. Its back molar hasn't even erupted yet. These are some examples of what our bone marrow might look like. The bone marrow on the left, it's a pinkish red coloration, but it's a peanut buttery consistency. It's super thick. This is what an animal who's in healthy condition is going to look like. But then you might get something like in the middle where it's super pink, and that's going to be gelatinous. It's going to be gooey. It might look like what I'm sticking my finger in right there, right? Some of my favorite things to do. And so in the summer and in the early winter, the condition of the animals they're killing are generally going to be pretty good. So the bone marrow is going to look like it does on the left. And that's just because the elk and the bison or whatever they're killing have just been indulging in a lot of green vegetation. They're super healthy. They're getting fat for winter. But in the late winter and the spring, the bone marrow and the condition is going to look more like the middle. So that might be to a lack of vegetation. It might be because the males are losing all their energy after just dealing with the rut, the mating season. Elk are going to be weaker and in poorer condition because they're holding on to their antlers. Our calves are going to be weaker just because they don't have a lot of fat storage. And they're smaller, and it's harder for them to efficiently travel through deep snow. And so the condition varies. When we collect our bone marrow samples, we're going to get a whole bunch of them all at once, and we're going to push each individual one out into these cups. We're then going to weigh the bone marrow as is. We'll then put it into an oven for a couple of weeks, and we'll dry it out. And based on the fat content in the marrow, that's going to tell us what type of animals the wolves are generally selecting for, healthy or sick, weak, injured, whatever it may be. This isn't graphic. Although wolves are predators and they do hunt ungulates, they're very poor hunters. They're only successful about 15% of the time at making a kill. So you're going to see this collared wolf hanging off the back of one of our collared elk. It's just a coincidence. They both happen to be radio collared. So this pack, they do kill this elk. It doesn't show it in the video. It ended up being an unfortunate circumstance. Something that probably should have taken 3 to 5 minutes was prolonged to about 6 hours because it was so close to the road. There were 1 million people, and the wolves were scared. And so they did end up in the middle of the road, and we did take the elk away. So it was a lot of hard work kind of for nothing. But the wolves will sift through herds to try and find one that's weak enough for them to take. So this is a little bag. The elk are going to try and stomp. They'll also try and horn them. You can see the wolves are being kicked the entire time. They actually don't kill one of these bulls, but when I do share things on social media, I'm sure you can imagine I get the comments that are like, why don't you show the real ending? This is the real ending. They ran away. So the wolves, I have only probably seen 10 kills, actually visualize them in the last 5 years. So it's very rare to see it. And so this is the only graph I have in my presentation. Bear with me here. This is the most important thing I'm going to share with you guys. So if you remember anything, remember this. We'll go through what each part means and kind of what this is showing us. So if you look on the y-axis here on the left-hand side, that's proportion, the percentage of the elk population. Then if you look on the x-axis down below, that's the age of female elk in years. So the yellow bars, that's the age of the elk in the park. If you're just looking at it, you can see that a majority of the elk are younger, under the age of 10. The gray bars on the right-hand side, that's the age of the elk when killed by wolves. Okay? The blue line shows that as the age of the elk increases, the likelihood that wolves kill them increases. It makes sense. Just like people, the older you get, the likely that you die, it increases, right? And then the pink line, that shows that you're less likely to survive as an elk if you're over the age of 12. Okay, and then last, the black line shows you that the ability as a female elk to produce a calf after the decreases as you increase in age, right? That just makes sense. And so we have visited over 3,000 wolf kills, over 6,000 carcasses in total, and this is what we found. That an elk between the age of 2 and 10 years old is almost wolves. And so wolves are generally selecting for female elk over the age of 12 past reproductive prime. And this isn't like my opinion, this is science. This is 28 years of data. So when you get people talking about wolves killing all the healthy elk, wolves going after the healthy bulls, sure, wolves can take a healthy cow, they can take a healthy bull, I've seen it, but they're selecting for ones that are weak, ones that are sick or injured, and that's just because they're so hard to hunt. Something I do like to show, this is Montana where I'm 313 right here. This is Gardner, Montana. This is where the park borders. We have all these people in my town saying we need to be able to hunt more wolves. They're killing all of our elk. The biologists of Montana say the elk are over-objective in 313. So you can see that the elk populations are doing really, really well in the state, even though we reintroduce wolves and wolves are killing them all. Fun little video, they tried. So this is the same trail that we saw them bringing the toys. And when we have wolves, we have scavengers. Wolves can consume about 20 pounds per sitting, but they're not the only thing consuming carcasses. Food comes with scavengers. Sometimes a prize shows up for the scavengers. For example, this young subadult grizzly bear sat on this carcass guarding it for days. So this was a natural death. This bison just died, and this bear enjoyed it for quite a while. But wolves do share carcasses with scavengers. So the wolf and the raven, they do share a symbiotic relationship. Where there are wolves, there will almost always be ravens not far behind. But sharing carcasses with apex predators can be dangerous. So one of our collared wolves is going to come in, kick this bear off. It's awesome that we get to document these types of interactions, right? We see this all summer long. This is one of my favorite videos ever. Yellowstone's unique in that we get to watch these interactions unfold. Keep an eye on this gray wolf. It's a yearling, a 1-year-old. Chasing this bear that probably weighs 200 more pounds. And then the bear kind of realizes, hey, why are you chasing me? I'm going to chase you. So we get to see these interactions all the time. A wolf-bear interaction is one of my favorite things to be able to observe. And then we see unique things like this. So this is 1229, my favorite. She found a bald eagle. She didn't really know what to do. So the bald eagle had a broken wing. We're not sure what happened to it. She thought it was a toy. And then you really get a sense of how big this bird is. And this is really how it ended. She didn't kill it. They went their separate ways, back consuming carcasses. The eagle most certainly died at some point, but we didn't witness it. So now we'll kind of discuss the observation part of my job. This is my specialty. I watch wolves thousands of hours every single year. So one of the most important things we do is pup counts. This helps us estimate the number of wolves in the park at the beginning of the year and the end. We like to keep track of wolf pup mortality also. So come springtime, May, we're watching den sites, trying to get eyes on the puppies, trying to get actual good counts, and it can be very, very difficult. Many months after the pups have left the den, we might go to the den sites to go inside and take measurements, just see what the den looks like that they used that year. And as you can imagine, there are lots and lots of fleas. Pup survival in the park is about 72%. So this is a female trying to move a newborn puppy across the road in the middle of July, in the middle of the day. Absolute chaos. She then decides she's going to take this puppy across one of our raging rivers, the Lamar River. She was a new mother this year, and she moved 9 puppies on her own. So this year, they produced 21 puppies. 15 of them survived. So this is that Junction Butte pack, that pack of 35. They're now a lot smaller. They have about 10 individuals. And this little black wolf is the only puppy that they had survive this year. So they go from having 21 puppies to just 1 puppy, right? They're balancing themselves out a little bit there. This was her very first adventure. And this is her now. You can hear me loading my paintball gun. She was not behaving properly this day. So something that's really awesome is we often get to see the wolves, puppies come out of the den for the very first time and then follow them for the next 5 years and document their entire life, which is something that people just can't do in other places of the world. This was my favorite this year. Mid-July, I was all alone, and I found the Shrimp Lake pack for just a brief moment. They're a pack my coworker and I discovered last winter. We got to name them, and so I am quite fond of them. Look what's trailing behind. The teeniest pup, a popcorn shrimp, if you will. And I was worried she only had 1 puppy because that's the only pup that I saw. But then a week later, I got up to do an aerial flight and saw that she had 4 little pups, which is really, really exciting for them. So they quickly went from a pack of 4 to a pack of 8. And I am quite biased towards these guys. And so sometimes this is what wolf viewing looks like. It's very poor quality because of the distance, the heat waves, and you're trying to count a lot of puppies. So this is what it'll be. So I sped this up a little bit, but this is what it looks like. You have to make sure you're not counting the same pup more than once. You want to make sure you're getting accurate counts. And so this year they had 18 puppies, 11 black and 7 gray. It's a lot harder to count. And this is those puppies up close. They came down for an adventure a few months later down at the creek. So these guys are a lot easier to count. They actually look like real wolves and not ants. And then sometimes we only see puppies from trail cameras. So remember the pups that were getting toys? This is them. You can see Mom up in the background. So after getting pup counts and determining overall pack size at the end of the summer, we then start to think about the importance of pack size and what it means. So imagine the pack on top runs into the pack on bottom. What's going to happen? Who wins? Sure. And what factors do you think are the most important for wolf-on-wolf conflict? Size. Size, what else? Age. Young or old is more important. Why? Experience, yep, exactly. So one of the most important factors is pack size. Of course, that makes sense, right? If a pack of 20 runs into a pack of 4, of course the pack of 20 is going to have an advantage. But even if you have 1 more additional wolf, which is what this is showing, the likelihood of winning increases by 80 to 90%. So let's think about basketball a little bit. You step onto a court with 5 players, and the other team steps onto the court with 6 players. Obviously, the team with 6 players has a better chance of winning. But imagine a different scenario where you're a team of 5 and another team of 5 comes out, but one of their players is Michael Jordan, right? Then you might not be at such a disadvantage anymore. And that's because a pack with more elder wolves or wolves over the age of 6 years old, they have a higher chance of winning a wolf-on-wolf interaction. And it's just because of what you guys said, experience, right? And it might even be experience in that maybe they wouldn't even engage because they know better. They know they might not have a chance of winning, depending. So it's really important to have elder wolves in the pack. Pack size also matters for things like hunting, not just territorial conflicts, but only up to a point. So if you look at the graph, the odds of a wolf pack successfully killing an elk is highest right around 4 to 5 wolves. But after that, it starts to decline. And we basically think of this as like too many cooks in the kitchen, right? So if you have a hunting group that's bigger than 5, More times than not, a lot of those are puppies. And the puppies are awful hunters. All they do is add chaos and distractions, and they are not helpful at all. They're just useless, and they just cause a lot more trouble for the adults. So pack size is really important for a lot of different things, though. And so we'll talk about cause of death a little bit. Does anyone know the leading cause of death for wolves in the park? They're protected. Yeah, wolves. Wolf-on-wolf conflict, exactly. And so anyone have an idea of how old our oldest wolf is right now? She's 10 years old. What do you guys think the average age of wolves are in Yellowstone? Yeah, about 4.5, yep. And so we're dealing with things like disease. So you can see in the top 2 photos, that's sarcoptic mange. It's a mite that makes the wolves super itchy. They'll pull out all of their fur. If you're a wolf in Yellowstone, it's negative 30 degrees outside, you have no fur, you're going to die. We see distemper virus come through the park, parvovirus, wolf-on-wolf conflict, like in the top right and the bottom right. We do have human harvest hunting outside of the park. And then prey, a kick from a bison or an elk can be a death sentence for wolves. This gray wolf here is 907. She's our oldest wolf in Yellowstone at a ripe 10.5 years old. She's quite gnarly looking up close. But something that's cool about her is in the last 28 years, she's produced the most litters of pups in Yellowstone wolf history. So she's had 8 litters of puppies. She's 10.5, yep. So you can see her a little bit better here. You can see her missing eye. She's definitely not the cutest wolf I've ever seen. But she eats very well. She's very plump. When we captured her, she weighed 119 pounds. Female wolves typically weigh 80 to 100. So she's doing very well for herself. She is the queen. And then this is the second oldest wolf in the park. This is 1090 from the Molly's pack. She's 9.5 years old, but you can see just like people with age, she's graying in color. So she's getting that silvery coat, arguably one of the most beautiful wolves I've seen. This is another look at her in her coat. So she's very beautiful. Some wolves, when they get old, don't. So it varies, just like humans. So we talked about wolf-on-wolf conflict being the leading cause of death. Sometimes well. So this gray wolf is a wolf from the most remote pack in the lower 48 states, the Hawks Rest pack. And he found this female. She liked him. Lots of flirting. And then this just happened a few days ago. So this black wolf is a wolf from the Molly's pack in Junction Butte territory. You'll hear lots of howling. That's usually how these conflicts begin. He's scared, and he should be. So Junction Butte, they're coming in. They all cross the road. When these conflicts happen, they happen to meet up with some of the Mollies who they knew, and it was a little reunion. It's not always the case. We often do see fatalities from this. But this day was lucky. Lots of wagging tails. Then when these events happen, because it's so chaotic, wolves get split up. They're separated from their packs, still lots of howling. And so again, this day did end with nothing, no fatalities, no injuries, and they quickly got back together, but then they all immediately leave the area as quickly as they can. But this was something unique that we got to watch. So this wolf here, this is the wolf they're attacking. Oh no, sorry. So it quickly becomes a mob mentality. Minutes before that, he was flirting with the breeding female. She was averting her tail for him. She wanted to breed him. All the girls were loving him. Then one of the other males came in, and everyone's switch flipped. They all became super aggressive. Something that's really interesting about this interaction is the wolf that's being attacked, he actually kicks out their alpha male, and he took over this pack, and he now runs this pack. So that was another really unique situation that we got to watch unfold. It's the only time I've seen this. So some of you already saw on the next slide, there is some graphic stuff. One of our wolves is cut open. If you don't want to look, don't look, but it is bloody, and I'm going to go there now. So when wolf-on-wolf conflict happened, it might just look like the wolf died. It's not going to be a super gory or bloody scene. It might look like they just fell asleep, like in the right-hand side. This wolf specifically, we almost didn't open her up. We just assumed she might have died of disease. Then we saw a little bit of blood from her nose. So we did decide to open her up. And when wolves die from some type of territorial conflict, it's like death by 1,000 bites. And so you'll really see the hemorrhaging on the inside of her where it's that dark, blackish, bloody color. And so the more in depth you go, the more you get to understand what actually happens, and you can kind of piece together the puzzle. We talked about injury from prey. So a kick to the head or ribs by a bison or an elk can be a death sentence. It's very hard for wolves to bring down something 4 times their size. And so this is when they did have over 30 members. You can see kind of their technique in hunting. They kind of pull off one that they think might be a little bit weaker or slower. And they did kill this elk. I just don't share it. And then the bison, they're way better at defending their calves and protecting themselves from wolves. And that's just because they really stay grouped together. They keep the young ones in the middle, and the wolves just have a really hard time of getting them. Though our wolves in the park, almost every single pack can hunt bison. It's a learned behavior, and they've mastered the craft. So in terms of biomass consumed, it's about 50, which is pretty cool because when we reintroduced wolves, it was 0% of their diet. So you can just see bit more aggressive. They keep their babies in the middle. The wolves try, but they're not always super successful. And then sometimes the elk are just jerks. So this wolf was minding its own business. She didn't want him there. So she probably had a calf or something hidden in the willows that we just couldn't see, and she made sure that the wolf was leaving. And so we get all of these people who say, you know, we see our wolves all the time on limping, maybe they are just laying in a certain area. We had a wolf who had a jaw that was just dangling there. And you get everyone who says, well, help them, interfere, you know, you need to help them, they're gonna die. Wolves are really resilient. All of our wolves have a limp at some point, and they heal very quickly. But this is just an example. This is wolf 911M. He was killed by other wolves, but at his necropsy, we discovered he had a severed jaw, and he likely had that for about 2.5 months. And so he was killed defending an elk he had just killed by himself with a broken jaw. And so this is an example of why we don't intervene every single time one of our wolves or some species in the park is injured, because they are a lot more, they will be okay most of the time. So had the wolves not killed him, he probably would have persisted for a while. And then disease, another leading cause of death. 10:05 here, this wolf on the left, she was found dead in her den. We had to pull her out. We just assumed some type of disease. But often when we get in, it's months later, and you know, it's hard to detect those types of things, so it's hard to know for sure. The wolf in the middle is an example of that mange again. You see it doesn't have a lot of fur, but you can see its rat tail. And then 1199 from the Cougar Creek pack to the all the way to the right, she likely died of malnutrition. We ruled it a natural unknown cause of death, but her bone marrow was very gelatinous, like we saw on those previous slides, very poor. She was not in good condition, but the scavengers had already gotten to her. So it just kind of gives you an idea that nothing goes to waste out here. We got a call that there was a dead wolf, so we went out to go pick it up. It was right next to the highway, so we just assumed it got hit by a car. We ended up doing a necropsy on it. This is us dragging it out, and it had 4 puncture wounds. It had had its head chomped by a grizzly bear. And that's the first time we've ever seen something like that. So it's never fun or cool to see a dead wolf, but when it does die, that's a cool thing to discover. What had happened likely is there was a carcass nearby. The wolves are typically more agile and faster than the bears, but it just must not have been paying attention and the bear got it. And then humans. We do have human harvest outside of the park. We have a hunting season. It's 6 months long. A resident wolf tag costs $10 for a bag limit of 20 wolves. 10 with rifle, 10 with trapping. Park wolves are no exception once they leave the border. As elk migrate, bison migrate, the wolves follow. So it's really hard for us when we're hiking. We run into things like this. But it's what it is. The wolves are doing okay. We have a really healthy population in the state of Montana, in the park. So even though we do have a hunting season on them, they're going to be okay. So what's new? We just started a new bioacoustics program. It's called Wolf Study, and the hope is to develop monitoring methods that are less invasive, less risky and challenging compared to radio collaring wolves with helicopters and traps. We hope to increase the accuracy of the wolf population movement and the present estimates, which are used to inform state and federal conservation practices. So we also hope to be able to recognize individual wolves based on their howling patterns or separate different packs based on specific howling signatures. This is what the recording device looks like. We had 31 vocalizations for the month of May following the Rescue Creek pack, but there were 0 calls between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., which is really interesting. So this kind of shows that same exact thing. And then this is what we're hearing. Oh no, where's my cursor? Okay. Puppies. And so the goal is to be able to use a population pack size. We already know the structures of the pack, and then we're able to use an artificial intelligence model to help determine the number of wolves howling. So that could be groundbreaking in terms of population estimates throughout the states. And this is just a series of howling from this specific pack that we're going to try to follow for the entire year. So each device is out for about 34 days, and these are all of our howling events that were captured over that month. This is going to highlight what it might sound like if you have interactions between different wolves. So just imagine what it would look like if your dogs were doing this and making these sounds. You can imagine the open mouth biting, you know, all the cute stuff. I like to highlight what it might sound like between the difference of howling of wolves and coyotes. I get questions about that all the time. There's a very distinct difference. You can hear the coyotes have a lot higher pitch. They're a bit more yippy. The wolves are super deep and soulful. This is what it sounds like and looks like when a grizzly bear reaches one of our recording devices and pulls out all of the batteries. So fortunately, he did not break it. But it is a pain in the butt when things like that happen. We try to put them up as high on a tree as we can physically reach to prevent the bison from rubbing it. The elk are constantly trying to rub their antlers on it, grizzly bears. But just over 34 days, we also picked up 100 different bird species. So what now? Where do we go next, right? Wolves are doing really, really well. They've recolonized most of the western part of the U.S. Wolves were reintroduced here this year, something that's exciting. The first wolf that produced puppies in Colorado a few years ago was our wolf, 1084, from the Snake River Pack. We're continuing to learn things every single year, and maybe the next step is to be able to become less invasive, not have to put out so many radio collars, use things like bioacoustics. You just never know. And something that we're trying to look into and discover is, could bioacoustics be a new method to use for non-lethal techniques for ranching, right? Is there a way that if there's a pack of 6 that might be in a ranching area, could you play a bioacoustic howlback of a pack of 20? And would that make them go away? Because in the wild, absolutely it would. And so these are just lots of questions that we're trying to answer over the next however many years. If any of you do keep up with the Yellowstone Wolves and have an interest in following along, these types of charts are available. I think they're $5 online somewhere. And this just keeps track of our radio-collared individuals, how many wolves are in the park, where they're located, pack composition, and things like that. I appreciate you all coming today. I'm happy to answer some questions afterwards. If I don't get to your question, feel free to shoot me an email at any time, or I'm happy to chat afterwards. But I appreciate you coming. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. Thank you so much.